Hello and welcome to Rick's RC Flying Channel. This is episode 4 of the Sweet and Low build. Episode 4 is all about building the empennage of the airplane, which is the entire tail. Uh, the tail section of this airplane is relatively easy to build. And that's why I chose this aircraft. It really, as you already saw with the fuselage, it's very simplistic in its structural design. And yet, being a basic airplane, it will introduce you and give you certain set skills that you may not get on a smaller basic model. Here, you're learning how to place ribs in a horizontal stab and, understanding that it's going to be hollow. You're going to, learn sheeting. So it's going to give you those set skills that kind of will let you, with more confidence, accept, various building projects. So right here, what we have, and for those that ever, were to choose to build this airplane and follow these instructions, the stab section only has 3 steps. I mean, it's pretty straightforward. Here we have 1/4 inch by 1 inch uh, balsa strips. And of course, you have to cut various angles to take this shape. And, it's actually not that difficult. Uh, Bottom line is, if you put an oversized strip here, and then you take your ruler over the plans and follow that, and that'll always give you the angle that you need to cut. So for example, this piece here, once you have this piece in, and of course I happen to have my pins in the way, but you would lay this down, overlay it on the line, and now you have the angle to cut. So, and it goes relatively quick. Now, these ribs here are basically 1/8 by 1/4 inch. Now, you can actually buy 1/8 by 1/4 inch, and that makes it that much simpler. However, I'm going to show you, if you can't get it or you don't have it, or you want to simply use up some of the other wood you have lying around, you can make your own. As a matter of fact, when it comes to making small size strips, uh, you can basically cut them yourself. And it's a handy little tool. It's they call it a balsa stripper. It's made by Master Air Screw, at least mine is, and they're relatively inexpensive. And it has a number 9 X-Acto, a number 11 X-Acto blade that you just simply attach to it. And by the way, generally speaking, I use number 11 blades mostly. I do have specialty blades, but number 11 is, well, really, really a good all-around X-Acto blade. So that's what's used here. And by turning this, this slides then back and forth, so you can cut whatever strip size you need, 1/16 an inch, 1/8 of an inch, 3/32, whatever you want. You simply take your ruler and then adjust the blade to whatever size you need. So we need 1/4 by 1/8. So I happen to have some extra wood lying around from other cuts. It's 1/8 of an inch thick. And I'll show you how this works. You simply put it, use some kind of cutting board. This is a self-healing mat. And you have to apply pressure against it just before you start, and hold the wood secure and pull it down. Now you got to hold even pressure on both sides. And for what it's worth, when you get to the end, as you get to the end, you got to put more pressure on this side than here, because if you do, it'll go like that. So if you want to prevent that, and you'll get the hang of it after you try it a couple times. So here we go. It's 1/8 of an inch, and we cut it 1/4. It's very easy to do. So, if you've got wood lying around and you don't need really long pieces, uh, it's a great thing to have around. So what you do is, here we're placing the ribs in, and nothing is glued here yet. So I'm just basically to demonstrate. So we got to get these angles cut in here. And, this is very light, easy stock. We're not talking big, heavy, thick pieces. And you can just take, this is a T sanding block, and you can even look over the wood and then just, inscribe the general angle. And then you can take this is 80 grit paper that has been placed on here. And sometime later in an episode, when I change the sandpaper, I'll show you how to do it. It comes off easy, and it's easy to put on. So anyways, I'm just generally getting the basic angle in there. Of course, it's exactly what we want. And as you get practice, you'll get very quick with it. So I'm sighting this here, and of course I'm going to do it oversized. Now, when it comes to cutting it, I mean, these are such short, simple, fast cuts. You can do it a lot of different ways. By the way, if you're starting out and you're setting up, you're a new builder, and you get yourself one of these miter boxes, it's good to have always a piece of wood in here. So when you are cutting it, it saves your blade. This particular one is grooved, so you can actually put a piece of brass tubing in there, and it really keeps it in position, and you can cut brass tubing and things like that. I mean, if you're very careful and you don't put too much pressure, I mean, you can use it the way it is, but I recommend just putting a little piece of wood in there. But quite frankly, for me, when you're making little basic cuts like this, you can actually just put the saw on there, and ever so gently. I mean, it's really no effort, so you don't have to, get big cutting boards out or anything like that. So we got the angle here, and now we're going to have to work on this angle. But before I do the final one, we are going to have to start gluing some of this stuff together because it moves around. And by the way, when it comes to saws, and again, I'm referencing people that are new into balsa building, especially. I mean, let's face it, if you happen to be a very experienced builder, you can probably do this almost with your eyes closed, and you have everything and all the tools. But this whole series was based on getting people to consider building a balsa airplane. It is so rewarding. The balsa airplanes have a really great flying personality. They just fly beautifully, and that's what this series is all about. So that's why I mentioned a lot of little things that obviously experienced builders are going to roll their eyes and say, yeah, I know how to use my saws. But however, that being said, this one is a fine blade saw. So when you're cutting softwood in small pieces, and especially if you want the cut to be clean, use the fine one. And by the way, you can get these on Amazon. All the hobby shops carry it, and even the arts and crafts. And a lot of times they sell them as a set. And what I mean, you get two blades. This one is a coarse blade. So if you're cutting bigger, heavier, thicker stock, harder wood, and you want to do it faster, the coarse one makes sense. And quite often they come with the handle, so you get two blades and a handle. I just went and bought another handle because I can't be bothered changing handles. But anyways, thought I would just mention that. So we are going to have to do some gluing here, because as you try to fit things, it might move another piece. So I have very tight fits. And, as I mentioned in one of my other videos, if you're going to use thin CA, as long as you've got really nice tight fits, it works great. And a lot of times I put the glasses on, not only because I can't see, but, these here are kind of springy. And so when you're using it, you got to be a little careful, because you never want any of this stuff ever to end up in your eye. So here we go. We're just going to put a little bit on here. And of course, it's not coming out, which is typical. I mean, that's why these tips have this length. And what you end up doing is, they eventually get plugged up. So you have to just snip a little piece off. Actually, the fact that it seals, when you put it away and you don't use it for a while, the fact that it seals is actually a good thing. If you watch the glue video, and you'll know all about that. So anyways, there we go, a little bit there. And this has great capillary action. It really soaks in the wood, bonds really next to instantly. Now, these ribs, these are pinned down. And when I pinned them, notice they're pinned at an angle, so the wood can never float up. Um, it's rare, but if you were to pin just straight up and down, and especially if the wood has some kind of inherent bow in it or something, it can actually ride up. Okay, so if you go at an angle, it can't do that. So that's why um, all these pins are at an angle, if you happen to notice that. So in putting in these ribs, I mean, if you were going to use alphatic glue, which is fine, nothing wrong with that, but because alphatic glue takes so much longer to tack, at least 25, 30 minutes, you're not going to hold the piece, then you would have to pin them. And quite frankly, I'll tell you there's no problem pinning pieces like that, but you can't split the wood, or um, it increases the whole workload of the project. And so this is where the CA glue is great. You can just make sure, because we don't want this to be higher. We want it to fit exactly. That's why these are 1/4 inch and this is 1/4, because it's all going to be the same level. So you just put a little bit of down pressure, make sure it's straight, and we're just going to put a little bit there and there. And that's already bonded. Like, just amazing stuff. Um, so now, and again, we're just lining everything up with the plans. And, if you have to make a small adjustment, just take your block and very gently, don't get too aggressive. Here's a funny thing. When you're sanding, if you got to sand a lot off, go for it. But as you get closer and closer and tighter to it, you want to sand less and less all the time. And I also then use finer. This is 100, this is 80. When you're doing fine, real precision fitting, um, I suggest using a little bit of a finer one, just so you don't, take too much off. You get too aggressive. So there we have a really good looking fit there. And I'm just applying a little bit down pressure because we want this to be flat. There we go, bonded. So that's the way to do it. It's very straightforward. Anybody can do this. So again, now that it's secure, it's a little bit easier making the final fit. So you look at it, and if you don't like the angle that it is, and there are times you're just going to take too much off and it's not going to work. Well, you got to just start off with a new one. But I always start off with it longer than it needs to be. So at least that first one, you've got plenty of time to adjust it. So we got a real good looking joint there. And so you can mark the angle. And again, if you're going to, instead of sanding that much off, I'm just going to take a little bit more off. Very easy with the fine single stroke. And now we're going to go for basically that precision fit. We're almost there. And yeah, like I said, there are times you're just going to take too much off, and it is what it is. So I really got what I want here. We're going to actually work at this end. We're getting closer and closer because I'm just trying to get it so it lines up with the line. And the closer you get, the less you do. Now that's looking good. Maybe just a little bit more. I mean, here we go again. You're not going to see it, but why not go for a really nice nice joints and fits? So here we go, a little bit of down pressure. You don't need much. The idea is, and it comes with practice, is to use enough glue that it basically takes care of the joint but doesn't flow all over your plans underneath, of course your project's going to stick, or the wax paper will stick to it. And even probably here, some areas it's going to stick. Okay, so that's generally, um, I'm going to finish this off. And after that, we'll remove it and do the sheeting. And before you know it, we got a horizontal stab. This is the elevator. And yeah, you're probably looking at it and saying, wow, that's really thick compared to that. Well, you'll see, don't forget, we got sheeting that's going to be glued on both sides. So that's going to increase the thickness. And the other thing is, on the sweet and low elevator is shaped like this. And I deliberately didn't cut it like that yet because instead of, I'm going to make maybe some small changes. Uh, Instead of making it a typical sweet and low sport airplane, which the other sweet and low basically is, um, I'm going more and more to making this airplane look like an Endecker. So if you look it up, you'll see what I mean. The sweet and low really lends itself to that for as a fun standoff scale airplane. Instead of just the generic sport look, I'm going to give it that World War I look, and I'm going to put a cockpit in it. And so the tail or the elevator on the Endecker is a slightly different shape. So that's the only thing I'm changing. I mean, the elevator is the same size generally. I'm going to give it a little bit more area, but otherwise, the lines, and the tail, the rudder, the vertical stab, really lends itself to that Endecker look. Anyways, I'll glue the rest of this all up, and then we'll go from there. All right, I've finished putting in the ribs, and now the next step will be some sanding, and then the sheeting. And we'll just get these T-pins out. If you have trouble pulling them, just turn them a bit. A little twist will do it. Okay, so that is straight as an arrow. So we're happy with that. And I'm just going to start off with a 80 T-block. And when I cut these 1/4 inch ribs, I made it just a little bit oversized. That way I have the opportunity to sand them flush. That way we don't end up with anything undersized. And then you just go with your finger and feel all the joints. So we go and feel them all. Make sure everything is perfectly flush. It makes for a better sheeting. Excuse me. Must be some sawdust in my throat. Okay. Oh, good. And it's very strong. and it'll be a lot stronger once the sheeting is on. And I have a handy little tool here. Just always double check that I don't pick up any wrong pieces, because sometimes between here, just always double check that I don't pick up any wrong pieces, because sometimes between there we go, wrong size piece. Okay, we're going to take a look at the steps that I took for the sheeting. And you saw I was originally sizing it up to make sure I got the right size of sheeting. And it turns out that the 3/32 by 3 inches, 3 pieces worked out well. And they got sort of a basic trim. It's oversized. And then I glued them together. Now this is the actual side where the glue was applied. I used thin CA. And what's interesting is you can see that it didn't go right through. However, though, we have 100% bonding. Even if I try to separate that joint, there is no indication of the joint separating. It is very well joined. So I took that sheeting and I used the glue side as the upside. It did get a light sanding just to ensure that it's absolutely flat. And that was placed down. And then I took the frame, and here's the frame. Yes, the sheeting's already been applied. And then I went and I applied medium CA all the way around and in the center section. Didn't touch any of this, just the outer part of the frame. And then it was placed down on top of the sheeting. So that's the sheeting that's there now. It was placed on top, and then I immediately went and pinned it down all the way around to ensure that it was flat. And then I took thin CA and I just followed the ribs and glued all of that and inside the perimeter of the framing. And the result was in short order, because CA, bonds so quickly. Here we are. We have a really nice finished smooth surface, and really it still needs to be sanded. We won't do that till the whole stab is finished. And it is, perfectly straight, really nice and straight. And it comes back down to, in the video I talk about setting up your workshop, how important it is to have a flat surface. And it can't be emphasized enough, because if you have a tabletop that is, as flat as you possibly can get, it will reflect in everything that you build on top of it. And, it'll show itself on the maiden flight that, you won't have to trim the airplane. It'll fly straight as an arrow. And if you have to do any trimming, more times than not is for other reasons. But, you build accurate and true, it'll pay its rewards. So I went and glued 3 more sheets together. And again, this is the side where the thin CA was applied, and then with the same result. Now, to use CA glue in this step, applying it, is not the same as when I glued this, because I was able to follow all along with thin CA. I mean, this already is incredibly strong. Everything is really well bonded. What I like to do, and that's not to say there, I'm sure there's modelers that, would use CA glue in this step. Now, thin CA glues instantly, so you definitely can't get away with thin CA. The thicker the viscosity of the CA, the slower it bonds. Thin is instant, but thick, it takes a little bit longer before it actually bonds. So, can you get away with it? I wouldn't do that. So what I do is I use carpenter's glue, and I'll apply it all around the perimeter. I'll actually spread it all out, and then I'll apply it on the top of the ribs. Then I'll take this piece, and again, it's slightly oversized. So, I have the flexibility of not having to fiddle around too much to get it to cover the stabilizer. So there we have it. And then what I'll do is simply apply weights on it. Because it's flat, it's easy to do. Just take a bunch of weights, and I'll cover the whole thing and let it dry overnight, and we'll end up with a perfectly accurate, true, nicely finished horizontal stabilizer. Then the only part that'll be left is to sand it so it's exactly conforms to the frame. Okay, the sheeting, the glue has dried, and it turned out very nice. It's very strong, very light, and it is perfectly straight. So I'm really pleased with it. So now what we have to do is just trim it to its final shape with regards to the frame. And this can be simply sanded, which works fine. But I have here a small plane. This one's made by Master Air Screw, but I have seen other models of it, and it does save you some time. We'll do the final sanding as we get closer. So now we have, it's perfectly straight, very strong. All the glue joints bonded well. We have very clean, nice edges. So there's the shape of the horizontal stabilizer. And you can see the fact that this was thicker, but of course it was in preparation for when the sheeting was put on. So now we basically have almost the same thickness, and of course it is slightly oversized by design so we can do all the final shaping. So that's coming along real nice, and then of course we will hinge it on. This will be cut here as well to allow the rudder to deflect. So we're done with the horizontal stab, and we'll prepare the elevator. If you like the video, please select like and subscribe. If you have any comments or questions about what you saw today, I welcome them. And thank you for watching, and we'll see you soon.